President Trump is pulling back on fentanyl-linked tariffs against China. For now, it's a move that marks the latest step in a tentative trade truce between Washington and Beijing. The White House says the rate will drop from 20% to 10% starting next Monday. The fentanyl-related tariff was first imposed to pressure Beijing to curb the flow of the deadly drug and its chemical precursors into the U.S. But after the Trump-Xi summit in South Korea last week, Trump agreed to scale back the levy, saying China made progress on enforcement. In an executive order Tuesday, Trump warns that he could raise tariffs again if China fails to follow through. In an interview with Fox News Sunday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the administration will check on Beijing's progress regarding the fentanyl curbs within 6 to 12 months. And based on that, tariffs on China may increase or decrease. In return, China's Ministry of Finance announced it's suspending its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. farm goods down to 10%. This includes soybeans, corn, wheat, and chicken, also taking effect next Monday. On top of that, Beijing says its 24% tariffs on all U.S. imports will be suspended for a year, matching Washington's timeline. The tariff pullbacks mark a pause in months of trade tensions between the two countries. Meanwhile, Trump says he plans to visit China in the first half of next year, followed by a U.S. visit from Xi. These upcoming meetings could determine whether the fragile truce holds. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court heard arguments from the nonprofit Liberty Justice Center challenging the Trump administration's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs. The case could redefine the limits of presidential trade authority. If the court strikes down Trump's tariffs, businesses could expect some price drops in their supply chains and store shelves. President Trump defended the tariffs ahead of the hearing, saying they're necessary to protect the U.S. from countries that have taken advantage of it. Florida's foreign land ownership laws back in full force. The 2023 measure almost completely bans Chinese citizens from buying land or real estate in the state. Only Chinese nationals with legal U.S. residency are allowed to buy one primary home. And anyone who already owns property before the law took effect must report it to state officials. Violating the policy could result in civil or even criminal charges. A group of Chinese buyers and a real estate firm sued, arguing it violates the federal law and discriminates against Asian Americans. But on Tuesday, a U.S. appeals court sided with Florida, clearing the way for the state to fully enforce the ban. Circuit Judge Robert Luck wrote for the court, quote, "National, individual, land and food security concerns motivated the law's enactment." The 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals cleared the way for Florida to enforce a law restricting real estate and land purchases by Chinese citizens. The court also rejected claims that it violates federal law or discriminates against Asians. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Attorney General James Uthmeier celebrated the win. The law is aimed at preventing the Chinese Communist Party from owning any land in Florida. The move could encourage other states to adopt so-called alien land laws. Currently, lawmakers in more than 30 states have passed or introduced bills restricting foreign property ownership. On September 1st, a new Texas law took effect, prohibiting Chinese nationals as well as citizens of Iran, Russia, and North Korea from buying most types of property in the state. On Tuesday, Missouri Governor Mike Parson signed an executive order to ban Chinese and Russian firms from buying land within 10 miles of active military sites in the state. Right now, the federal government is tightening oversight of foreign land ownership through rigorous review mechanisms. It's vetting any overseas investment tied to national security. It now requires non-citizens holding 10 acres or more of U.S. farmland to file detailed disclosures. The financial center of the world, New York City, is one step closer to socialism or perhaps even communism. Zohran Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City on Tuesday. He plans to launch the city's first universal childcare program and make all city buses free. Mamdani also proposed a rent freeze for about 1 million residents living in rent-stabilized apartments. To fund these ideas, he wants to raise taxes on the city's wealthiest residents and increase the corporate tax rate. President Trump called him a communist, and Mamdani's opponents are warning that his socialist policies could negatively reshape the city. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more.
New York City has elected its new mayor, Zohran Mamdani. The 34-year-old New Yorker will be on 2026 the new mayor of the largest city in the United States. It remains to be seen if he will be able to implement all the promises that got him elected.
New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change. A mandate for a new kind of politics.
And this campaign was necessary to make that point. A caution flag that we are heading down a dangerous, dangerous road. Well, we made that point.
Andrew Cuomo's campaign attracted not only anti-socialist Democrats and independents, but also Republicans who did not want to see a socialist leader elected to be the next mayor of the city.
The other candidate, like Zohran Mamdani, I think he's dangerous. We don't know what he's going to do to the city, and that made me and also my friends who are like huge Trump supporters all like to decide to support Andrew Cuomo in this election because it's not about parties.
Jewish Americans living in New York City also sent a warning to New Yorkers and to the rest of the country of what it means that Zohran Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City.
As a Jew in New York City, realizing that Zohran Mamdani, he doesn't like us. And he is someone who is, call him a wolf wearing a sheep's mask. And he's out to get us by slogans, by words. And he's fooling all the people who are in New York City that are uneducated.
A tearful Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate, sent a message to the victorious candidate, Zohran Mamdani, that his movement is not over and that the guardian angels will be here in New York to watch for the safety of New Yorkers and the future of this city.
If you try to implement socialism, if you try to render our police weak and impotent, if you forsake the people's public safety, we're not only organizing, but we are mobilizing, and we will become the mayor-elect and his supporters' worst enemies.
New York City has now elected its first Muslim mayor, a Democratic socialist, and it remains to be seen what lessons the Democratic Party learns from these elections and takes on to the midterm elections next year. Reporting from New York City, New York, Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
U.S. intelligence warns that China and Russia are using sex spies in an effort to steal technology and state secrets. The move is part of a growing psychological warfare campaign on Washington from foreign adversaries. On Wednesday, former CIA operative J. Michael Waller told Fox News he's witnessed it firsthand. Waller described an encounter at a Polish work event when a young Chinese woman approached him. He recognized it as a classic honeypot tactic. Here's Waller on the situation.
When we got to the hotel area, she kindly invited herself up to my room. And then I looked at her and I said, no 25-year-old woman is going to want to be hanging around me for that kind of thing. You're a spy.
Waller said the woman already knew details about his background beyond what was publicly listed. After he reported her to Polish authorities, she was expelled from the country within days. Waller highlights that these tactics are now highly organized, with schools in China and Russia training young men and women to become spies. Meanwhile, a former Russian sex spy told the New York Post recently that Russia's using honeypot tactics to target Silicon Valley and steal tech and trade secrets. Earlier this year, the U.S. barred government personnel stationed in China from having romantic or sexual relationships with Chinese citizens. Anyone who violates this policy will be required to leave the country. The world's largest coffee chain is giving up its majority stake in its China businesses. Starbucks says it plans to form a joint venture with Chinese investment firm Boyu Capital. The deal is valued at $4 billion. Here are the details.
Starbucks will sell control of its China operations to investment firm Boyu Capital, one of the most valuable divestments for China unit by a global consumer brand in recent years. The $4 billion deal gives Boyu up to 60% of Starbucks' retail business in China, while Starbucks keeps 40% and continues to own and license its brand and intellectual property to the new entity, the company said. Starbucks said it expects proceeds from the sale, combined with its retained stake and licensing over the next decade, to top $13 billion. The company's shares rose about 3% in after-hours trading. The move comes as Starbucks loses ground to cheaper local rivals, and faces a slowing economy that's making consumers more price sensitive. Rival Luckin now operates more than 20,000 franchise stores, far ahead of the 7,800 stores operated by Starbucks, though its model focuses on takeaway and delivery. Starbucks' comparable store sales in China rose 2% in the quarter that ended on June 29, after flat growth the previous quarter. Starbucks also flagged that rising US-China tensions pose risks, including tariffs, boycotts, and growing political sensitivities in China. Starbucks is not the first US brand to divest or partially divest its operations in China. McDonald's, for example, sold a majority stake in its China and Hong Kong operations to investors, a tie-up widely seen as successful.
Coming up, Washington has recently reopened a direct military hotline with Beijing, but experts are skeptical on whether it will actually improve communications. Retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham weighs in.
We've had communications links with the Chinese military for years, for many years, and every time we've called, they've never picked up the phone. So this is nothing new.
Chinese fast fashion retailer Shein is facing accusations of involvement in pedophilic activity. A French child protection association speaks out. And as tensions between China and Taiwan rise and spill into the region, residents on a Philippine island are worried about their future. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The U.S. has recently opened a direct military hotline with China to prevent tensions from escalating. But some experts remain skeptical that it will improve communication between the two countries. To gain more insight on this, we spoke with retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham, Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy, for his take.
I don't think it will have any effect at all. We've had communications links with the Chinese military for years, for many years, and every time we've called, they've never picked up the phone. So this is nothing new. It seems as though this crop of people running the military side of things in the Pacific sort of forgotten about all this. I imagine they know, but for some reason they have this American conceit that if we can just talk to people, we can work out any problem. And that is almost an American characteristic. I think Will Rogers understood it. But it doesn't work with the Chinese. And all you just come across is a supplicant begging them to just please talk to us, instead of having them make the first move when they have something to talk about. We've tried to talk to the Chinese, to have these ties with them so that we can call up and get problems resolved, and it has never worked. You named the incident that has happened, going back to the Americans hitting the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in the late 90s. Chinese didn't pick up the phone, and every incident since then, it's never happened. So that's something that really does need to be kept in mind when we sort of pat ourselves on the back for having set up a new communications link with the Chinese. And also, one would note that wars don't happen by accident. It's not miscalculations. It's because one side wants to start it. And the idea that somehow, if we were just talking, that it's going to head off a war, I don't know that there's empirical evidence for that. If there's going to be a war, China's going to start it because they want to, because they think they can win it. And they're not going to be talked out of it. But once again, it's Americans sometimes just are not comfortable keeping their mouths shut. Sometimes they should.
Chinese platform Shein is facing backlash in France after authorities discovered sex dolls depicting children. Well, Shein claimed it had removed the products. An investigation by a child protection association found that wasn't the case. The group revealed that the dolls were still being sold in other countries, including the UK and Chile. NTD International correspondent David Yves reports from Paris.
China-based fast fashion giant Shein is once again facing criticism, this time over the sale of Childlike sex dolls on its platform. France's consumer watchdog reported the company to judicial authorities after discovering several listings that appeared to depict minors. Shein reacted swiftly, announcing a total ban on all sex dolls and adult products and promising to strengthen its control system. But according to the president of the child protection group Move Enfant, the company's statements were misleading. The sex dolls were still available to sell in other EU countries, said Arnaud Gallet.
Shein lied at first when it claimed to have removed all childlike sex dolls. Our team found several sex dolls still available abroad. Using VPNs, we saw them on their websites in the UK and Chile. It was only after we exposed this to the authorities that they finally disappeared from the platform.
The topic sparked strong criticism on France's parliament on Tuesday.
Yes, Shein has removed those puppets, but only in France, and only after the association Mot Pouv Enfant tagged them. If people are using VPNs, that means, as the Mouv Enfant Association proved it, that pedophiles can continue to buy them from anywhere in the world.
The scandal comes just days before Shein opens its first ever permanent store in Paris. The timing has sparked outrage among child protection advocates, who said the company should face sanctions instead of being welcomed in French department stores. The case also highlights another issue. Shein reportedly lists around 10,000 new products every day, making it nearly impossible to monitor each one for illegal or inappropriate content.
With so many products added daily, it's clear Shein cannot guarantee proper control. We have no reason to trust this platform, and authorities are far too lenient. They should face real sanctions, not a second chance. We can't trust this site and this platform, which has lied once again and, above all, has allowed itself to sell this type of product, which is, of course, scandalous. It just means that China is participating in pedocriminality. For me, that's the take we have here.
France's Minister Roland Lescure said yesterday, were Shein to continue selling these sex puppets, the website might face a permanent ban in France. Shein's new retail space is still set to open this Wednesday in Paris's historic BHV department store. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Amid rising tensions between China and Taiwan, residents of a Philippine island are worried about their future. Here's a closer look at how the Pacific region is affected as Beijing increases its threats against Taiwan.
As tensions rise between China and Taiwan, residents of the stunning islands of Batanes are growing increasingly anxious. The least populous province of the Philippines is also its northernmost and closest territory to Taiwan. Until recently, locals say it was a peaceful backwater where the indigenous Ivatan people make a living from fishing and tourism.
Food can be expensive since a lot is shipped from the mainland. So we all have to learn how to fish.
But the northern tip of Batanes is just 87 miles from Taiwan's southern point, and many, like fisherman Joven Cabrera, worry their island will get drawn in if conflict breaks out.
Nobody wins in war, yet everybody will be affected, especially civilians. We should pray that that won't happen, because given how close we are, it's inevitable that Batanes will be affected.
Over the past 5 years, China has stepped up military drills near Taiwan, which it sees as a breakaway province. Xi Jinping has said Beijing won't renounce the right to use force to resolve the dispute over the island. Taiwan's government rejects China's sovereignty claims, saying only the island's people can decide their future. Batanes also sits on the southern edge of the Bashi Channel, a major shipping lane between the Philippines and Taiwan that connects the South China Sea with the Western Pacific.
Some countries would want Batanes, I would say, for military purposes and for trade purposes.
Commodore Edward Aikedesagon, former head of the Northern Luzon Naval Command, underlined the strategic importance of Batanes to his country.
It's very important that we come up with credible forces there to protect the national interest.
Earlier this year, annual joint US-Philippine military exercises were held closer to Taiwan. Reuters reporting shows the drills revealed how the two sides plan to use ground-based anti-ship missiles to make the Bashi Channel impassable in a conflict. It would help deny the Chinese Navy access to the Western Pacific, which is vital for potentially countering US and Japanese attempts to intervene in a Taiwan crisis. Residents, however, are looking beyond military preparedness.
The least that you can do, in fairness to our people, is to get them prepared.
Former lawmaker Florencio Abad is from Batanes.
If hostilities erupt, there may be no sea or air transport. And where do we get our food to eat? If we get involved again in a war, how do we take care of ourselves, you know?
And that's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.